I cheated on my wife with her best friend. Now she is blackmailing me into divorcing my wife. For some reason, many times a man cheats on his wife with another woman. In my particular case, I am talking about my wife's best friend. A woman whom my wife considers more than a good friend, as if she were her sister, since she has known each other since high school. My wife's friend, after finishing high school, married a sweetheart of her life and they had 2 children. Years later, as a result of cheating on the part of her ex-husband, the relationship ended in divorce. Several months before the divorce papers were filed in court with the children's father, my wife's best friend moved in with the boyfriend she now has. On the contrary, my wife, after she left high school, chose to study a degree at the university in the area of social work and community development. Several months later I and she met. Several months later we made the decision to get married, and we have a little boy. My wife's best friend, after her divorce from the father of her children, as a way of not feeling alone, according to my wife, entered into a relationship with her boyfriend as a rebound due to a breakup with her husband. My wife assured me that she didn't really love her boyfriend, that she was with him for 3 reasons: trying to get over the ex-husband's cheating, someone to help with the bills, and why, according to her, sex with her boyfriend is good. Many times women use the expression when they want to leave a relationship, "The problem is not you, the problem is me." It is something that you should consider when you hear real reasons why I cheated on my wife with her best friend, and how that woman right now is blackmailing me into leaving my wife, and the emotional manipulation methods she is using to get her their objectives. Why did I cheat on my wife with her best friend? I am not condemning what I did, because what I did was a cowardly, shameful and disgusting act affecting a woman like my wife who loves me unconditionally. But, product of my weakness as a man to see the naked body of a woman in a moment of passion, I lost control and ended up making love with my wife's best friend. This act of infidelity against my wife occurred during a crisis in the relationship between my wife's best friend and her boyfriend, in which my wife suggested that she spend a weekend with us, as a way to calm the situation. But, also for her to clear her mind, she will also avoid facing an emotionally toxic situation during that weekend, and seek a solution to the problem that her best friend had with her boyfriend. What my wife and I never understood is that the problem was not her boyfriend, the problem was really her. As a man, I really understood who my wife's best friend really was too late, after I had sex with her in a moment of passion when my wife was out of the house taking our child to the park. Product of that moment of passion, desire, weakness, nervousness, uncontrollable desire and non-stop madness of a man, who could not resist seeing the naked body of my wife's best friend in front of me, in which she used the tricks all women uses to seduce a man, when she wants to control a man's emotions, and there is the slightest product of that moment of frenzied madness, as a result of desire. I make love with my wife's best friend. Sometimes I wonder, she made love to me because she really liked me? Or was one moment of passion with me was the result of her feeling emotionally vulnerable, because of everything that was happening around her, and by sleeping with me she is looking for emotional support in the wrong way? But, could it also be a much more sinister and profound plan by my wife's best friend to destroy our marriage at all costs? Maybe listening to this story you can come to your own conclusions. Now she is emotionally blackmailing me into divorcing my wife, otherwise she will tell my wife what happened between the 2 of us. My situation right now is extremely difficult, because I don't have control over the low instincts that men have, when we are in front of the naked body of an extremely beautiful and attractive woman. Someone once told me that only a woman knows what another woman thinks, because men's brains are wired differently than women's. Understanding the reasons my wife's best friend had for sleeping with me at a time when she was in crisis with her boyfriend is something that doesn't fit in my mind, although I don't understand how she ended up having sex with her wife's best friend either. Did my wife's best friend really have sex with me because she was attracted to me as a man, or was it a way of destroying the marriage that her best friend had as a product of revenge against my wife, for reasons unknown to me? These are ideas that are going through my mind right now, trying to understand the reasons why my wife's best friend had an intense moment of passion with her best friend's husband. Almost a month after both being together in bed, Now the wife's best friend is looking for a way to keep in touch with me in any way. Sometimes using emotional manipulation, using my infidelity that I had against my wife against me. First was the call that she made posing as the victim, in which she made me believe that there was a possibility that she was pregnant, and that future child could be mine since she was several days late. But, when I asked her if she had been to the doctor or had done the pregnancy test they sell at the pharmacy, she told me no, but as soon as she did the test she would call me to let me know. No one doubts that those were the most horrible days of my life, because having a child out of wedlock was not my plan, and a pregnancy was something that could not be hidden, and more so when we talk about the wife's best friend. Although she assured me that if she was pregnant there was a lot of hope that her boyfriend could be the father too, which was a bit of a relief. Several days passed and my wife's best friend wrote me a text on the phone telling me that she had taken the test, but trying to make it big. That news was something in which we both had to be present as to know the results, that we meet in place where we can be alone. At that time, the estate of there was a great possibility of being a father again. It was eating me up inside and I had a great desire to know what the situation was with the pregnancy, given the seriousness in the text. It made me think that the pregnancy test was positive and that she was pregnant. Thousands of questions arose in me, unfounded fears about what would happen in the future in my marriage, hatred against myself for what I did, cheating on my wife with her best friend, disappointed in myself for having failed my wife as a husband and as a man. Days later we met in a quiet, solitary and at the same time cozy place, as if it were a couple celebrating special news, although in my case it would be the confirmation of bad news. After a long wait with anxiety to know about the result of the pregnancy of my wife's best friend, which could change my life forever, she sat next to me with an expression of satisfaction, not concern about the seriousness of the situation in which we were both involved. I am a married man and she a woman with her boyfriend. This attitude of hers produced a moment of uncertainty in me, due to her lack of concern about the results of her pregnancy. My first question to her was, what was the result of the pregnancy test? In which she told me that she was not necessary because the same day and the night that we had her conversation, her menstrual period had started, which confirmed that she was not pregnant. When I heard her answer I felt a huge relief in avoiding a situation that could destroy my marriage by having a child out of wedlock, and could also save the marital relationship between my wife's best friend and her boyfriend. But, to my surprise, having overcome a fear caused by the pregnancy, there was another fear that I did not know about when it comes to knowing how women think and why they really do things. At that moment, I discovered the second lowest form of emotional manipulation that women use against men, to get what they want without caring what others feel or suffer. The pregnancy sign was just a trick used by my wife's best friend to draw my attention to her in the most rude and vulgar way. Even knowing how desperate I was to know the results, just sending me a text saying that it was just a simple delay in her period would have saved me several days of unnecessary anguish and despair. For many men the announcement of being a father is the most beautiful thing. For me it was something that terrified me. When I complained to her about what she had done, she simply replied that as a man I did not know everything a woman do to be close to the man she wanted. Her response, which created a new kind of concern in me about what this woman wouldn't do to destroy her best friend's marriage. Sitting both face to face at the same table, my wife's best friend looking into my eyes, trying to hold my hand, told me in a serious tone, "I have always wanted to have a man like you as a husband." My answers were, about what she said, "I thought you were my wife's best friend." She, staring at me, told me that we were never best friends. "Your wife treats me like a sister, but I don't see her the same way. Your wife was always considered as a girl, who was considered as wife's material, contrary to me, that everyone never looked at me this way. Until I found the father of my children, who in me something I never understood. Maybe that's why at first he cheated with a woman, who was the love of his life. I always saw your wife with admiration for everything she could offer as a man, as a friend and as a woman. But I also sometimes envied her, because she had something that I will never have, the love and respect of a man who loved her deeply. Until now, your wife is a happy woman to find a man like you, who loves her unconditionally. A man who emotionally weak like most men, when they are in front of the naked body of a woman. Something that I noticed and took advantage of at that moment. When she told me that, I thought about what we did together, cheating on my wife with her best friend. I did my part and I'm sorry for that. When she heard that from me, she held my hands and wondered. You really don't like me as a woman? You don't find me an attractive woman? My answer to both questions was, releasing my hands from their hands, I told her. That was not the problem. I was simply deeply in love with my wife, who in a moment of weakness had an affair with her best friend. You are an attractive woman who can drive any man crazy, but deep down you are not the type of woman that I like as a wife, much less as a woman, because you only think about what you want, not what others want. Maybe that was something your ex-husband understood, that he can be married to you. You as a woman, use your body to manipulate men to resolve some kind of frustration after your husband cheated on you. And now you are judging all men for what your husband did to you. She, with a shocked expression, answered me with a question. When you and I had sex, you didn't enjoy it. You didn't want to touch my naked body? You had no desire to have my body under your body in bed? In that moment of passion when you were making love to me, did you think of your wife? That tells you that all men cheat when they get the first chance. Listening to what she told me, I replied, maybe you're right, but I still love my wife and nothing can change that. She told me, what do you think she will say and react when your wife finds out that you were unfaithful to her with her best friend? Looking her in the eyes in a tone of defiance. I don't really know about her, but any negative reaction from her is something I take responsibility for. For some reason my wife's best friend doesn't seem to be listening, and she tried to touch my chest as if trying to seduce me, which I rejected by moving away from her. She reacted sharply, telling me out loud that I had to decide between sleeping with her or breaking up the marriage with her wife. My answer was, I didn't know that you would sink so low trying to force me to sleep with you. My wife's best friend told me in a soft and seductive tone, sweetheart, you don't know what a woman does when she is obsessed with a man, something that you should have thought about when you spent a moment of passion with your wife's best friend. After talking, then she told me, think about what I said, let's have a moment of passion, the two of us together one more time. And your wife will never know what happened between us. What would happen if I agreed to her demand? Nobody knows that. The moment she feels that she has total control over me, she will never give it up. That's what a manipulative woman always does. To believe in the word of this woman would be the second worst mistake of my life. After finishing the conversation with my wife's best friend about her demands that we have sex one more time, as a condition for her to keep her mouth shut about what happened between her and me, I said goodbye in silence, as if forgetting everything that was said, because nothing could endanger my marriage, much less the emotional blackmail of a woman who goes to the bottom to get what she wants, without caring about the damage she causes to other people. For a week, almost every day, I received a text from my wife's best friend telling me how much she wanted, but the worst of all was the sending some images in which she showed her entire naked body, so that I would remember that moment of passion that we had previously. For some reason there was an immense concern inside me, as a result of which she showed the type of obsessive behavior about having sex with me, and let's not talk about what she was thinking of doing in case I did not comply with her demand by telling my wife what happened among us. For several days, I always came home worried about my wife's reaction if her best friend, as a result of her threats, would tell her that I had cheated on her with her. When my wife greeted me with a smile when she came to the thing, that produced a whole relief in me, because my wife's best friend still had not followed through on her threat despite the fact that I never returned the call, either all the texts sent by her. For me it was an agonizing situation over which I had no control. Either I agreed to the blackmail of my wife's best friend or I put the marriage in danger. As a way to take control of the bad situation, for which I must assume all responsibility for weakness as a man in front of the naked body of a woman, which I was going through. With fears of losing my wife and son, I made the decision to tell my wife the whole truth about the passionate moment I had with her best friend, and also what my wife's best friend was doing to blackmail me into that I break up the marriage and move in with my wife's best friend. One Saturday afternoon, at the same time that my wife usually takes our children to play in the neighborhood park, I asked her not to do it at that time, because I would like to talk to her alone about something that she should know about her best friend, and why she should never trust her. My wife asked the neighbor across the street if she could look at the child for several minutes while she resolved the situation. Sitting both on my same sofa in front of the television, my wife sat next to me and asked me with a worried face what I wanted to talk about, which I considered important. Looking at my wife in the eyes, taking both hands with a soft tone of voice, I told her that I had failed her as a husband, and as a man, reasons for which I must ask you to forgive me for what I am going to tell you, but also for what I did as a husband, who lacked respect to his wife, an extremely kind, caring, trustworthy woman and a good mother. The ideal woman that any man would give everything to have by his side. My wife told me with an expression of concern that she thinks the same of the man that I put in her path, for which she felt the happiest woman in the world to have a man like me. Expression of my wife which hurt me in the depths of my soul, and all for a moment of passion with the wrong woman, in the wrong place and the wrong reasons. After listening to my wife, my response to her was, "You don't deserve a man like me, a man who for a moment of weakness cheats on his wife with her best friend." She fell silent in shock, trying to understand what she was hearing from a man she trusted unconditionally. My wife, after hearing my confession about cheating with her best friend, she didn't yell, she didn't get angry, she didn't hit me or curse me. With tears running down her eyes, she asked me with a suppressed cry and anguish on her face, "You don't love me anymore? You don't find me an attractive woman? Did I fail you in meeting your emotional needs as a man?" My answer was, "You are the only woman that I have always loved, and even if you don't believe it right now as a woman, you are the best thing that has happened to me, for which I am grateful." My wife could not resist crying. The wounds of cheating were something that she could not bear at that time. My wife felt confused, lost and disappointed. Minutes ago she was the happiest woman in the world taking our child to play in the park. Now she feels that her world is collapsing before her feet and she doesn't know what to do. All for a moment of weakness from me, to satisfy a moment of passion, and all because of my selfishness as a man, who only thought of himself when he cheated on his wife with her best friend. But, in my case, I had to decide between accepting the emotional blackmail of a mentally obsessive woman, or living with the daily fear that my wife finds out that her husband cheated on her with her best friend, which could be an unbearable situation for me. My wife did not deserve to live with an emotionally weak man, who did not have the courage to face his mistakes. Perhaps the product of the enormous disappointment about my behavior as a man, or because she felt that the marriage between her and me was all false, that I really did not love or appreciate her as a wife, a marriage built on lies, infidelity and false confidence. My wife got up abruptly from the sofa and with trembling hands she dried her wet eyes from crying. "So much," she told me with broken words, "later we will continue this conversation, but now I have to look for my child, and take him to the park so he can play with friends." At that moment I felt like the most despised man in the world because of the pain I am causing my wife, a man devastated inside for what I did, a man without hope that my wife would forgive me for cheating on her with her best friend. Hours later my wife returned with our son. "I'm not lying to you. Dozens of negative thoughts associated with our marriage was something that caused me great concern, and even more so when there is a small child involved." For several days, my wife used the punishment of silence, which made my emotional situation unbearable. I ended up sleeping in the guest room and also full of uncertainty about what would happen to our marriage. For some reason, my wife, as a human behavior professional doing social work, there is no doubt, she has enormous emotional intelligence, which is even more so in handling this bad situation. One Saturday afternoon while I was watching the sports game, my wife came up to me and asked if she could sit next to me, which reminds me of that Saturday when I cheated on my wife with her best friend. My wife, looking me in the eyes, she told me, "I want you to tell me exactly what happened between you and my best friend." After telling you exactly everything that happened, when I had a passionate moment with her best friend, she smiled and told me, "Your story coincides with the story that my best friend told me when she had a moment of passion with you." On that side, I thank you for telling me the truth and the way you resolved the situation. In case, don't worry about my best ex-friend, she will never bother texting you again, much less using blackmail to get you to sleep with her one more time. Several days ago, I spoke with my best ex-friend and she told me everything. She even told me that I am a happy woman to find a man like you. That as a wife, your husband is a type of man who could be forgiven for any kind of mistake, when he can't resist seeing the naked body in front of him, contrary to her ex-husband. When I heard the words of my wife, I felt enormous relief, asking her if she forgave me for what I did, and she replied, forgiveness is something that is not given. It is something that is earned, and your greatest task as a husband is to regain the trust that I had in you. It is something that you and I have to work on as a couple to overcome any trauma resulting from your cheating with another woman. But first, you have to forgive yourself for being a weak person in the face of seductions from a woman who is not your wife, and work hard to get your wife to learn to trust you again. My wife, in a sign of love and understanding, gave me a warm kiss on the lips as a sign that everything was fine, and asked me if she could watch the sports game with me. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like this story of cheating, infidelity, broken marriage, please share this video. That way the YouTube algorithm can recommend this video to a larger audience. But also subscribe and leave your comments.